We are so honored today to have Bishop's friend and colleague, the Reverend Ryan McDaniel, to speak to us today. The Reverend Ryan McDaniel has been a member of the faculty of the Department of Communication Studies at EIU since 2007. He was saying out there in the lobby, it's amazing, Bishop and I have been friends for 10 years. That's pretty great. He is married to Michelle McDaniel, a reference librarian and instructor at EIU's Booth Library. A proud alum, Ryan has earned 4 degrees from Eastern, including Bachelor of Art degrees in Communication Studies and Philosophy, and Master of Art degrees in, in Communication Studies and History. He also, there's so many degrees here. Help me, Jesus, is all I can say. He also holds a Master of Art degree in theology from the Aquinas Institute of Theology, a Master of Divinity degree from Lutheran Rice Seminary and University, and has studied religion as a postgraduate student at Princeton Theological Seminary. Most recently, he has pursued doctoral studies in religion and rhetoric at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, as well as Nashotah House Theological Seminary. In addition to his service at EIU, Ryan McDaniel is an ordained priest of the Orthodox Church, serving in various local ministries as a chaplain in the Illinois Air National Guard. Ladies and gentlemen, I give to you the Reverend Ryan McDaniel.
As you're able, I invite you to stand for a reading from the Holy Gospel according to John, as well as a prayer to the Holy Spirit. Then Pilate said to him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this purpose was I born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" And I would pray now a very ancient prayer from my tradition, a very ancient prayer that Christians have been praying for many, many, many centuries to the Holy Spirit. I would invite you to join me. O heavenly King, Comforter, Spirit of truth, who art everywhere present and fillest all things, treasury of blessings and giver of life, come and abide in us, cleanse us from every impurity, and save our souls, O good one. Amen. Please have a seat. My address to you today will focus on the vocation to cultivate a renewed confidence in truth. That's my address to you today. I hope that you will indulge me a familiarity with Bishop Robinson. I've known him as Andrew for a long time, and I hope you'll indulge me that familiarity to address him and refer to him as Andrew. I hope that's all right. As Wanda Kay, or as she's apparently affectionately known, Mama Kay, was just saying, I was remarking in the hall, it's remarkable, that we've been friends for over 10 years. And Andrew gave me an elbow and said, "It's been even longer than that." And he's right. We were in the same cohort together when we were both working on the Master of Arts degree in Communication Studies. so it's been even longer than that. But when I joined the faculty, Andrew welcomed me into a shared office space. Believe it or not, it was a little bit more crowded around here in 2007. And we actually were sharing an office, and we struck up an immediate friendship. Not in small part because we were both convinced of the importance of the vocation to restore confidence in truth. So why was I, perhaps an idiosyncratic speaker for an august ceremony such as this, invited to speak to you today? I was introduced as a priest of the Orthodox Church. If I were to venture a guess, I might say that some of you have not heard of, or in any case are not all that familiar with, the Orthodox Church. Our traditions are, one might say, a bit different. And so I thought about this, and I thought, no, it's fitting. I'm a longtime friend of Andrew's, and as I was noting out in the hall before we gathered here, I have more than one former student in our midst. So that's personal. And in spite of whatever else we might have as a difference, we hold something remarkable in common in the midst of our prevailing culture. We believe in the importance of truth. Jesus said, "I am the truth." Pilate, speaking for what could be the voice of our prevailing culture, cynically asked, "What is truth?" So perhaps I can offer something that will be sermonic, but not a sermon. Something academic, but far removed from a lecture I might give over in Coleman Hall. My address today, again, is to focus on what I believe is certainly a very important aspect of the vocation of our three graduates today. You're entering a context in which the prevailing culture dismisses the very idea that there is an objective, real truth about faith and morals, let alone the knowability of such a truth. This is a deep and profound challenge in speaking to our prevailing culture. A challenge shared regardless of what tradition you might be hailing from, if you are any kind of traditional Christian in any, again, traditional sense of the word at all. We have several shared challenges as well, several shared challenges. But I'm convinced that in order to meet those challenges, we need a ground to stand on. How can we meet a challenge unless we have a ground to stand on? And that important shared ground to stand on is the conviction that there is this truth and it is knowable. At that point, if we disagree, you know what? It's all right. That's healthy. We talk, we discern, but we have the same goal in mind. We're not cynically dismissing what is truth, but we want to know what is it, and we can discern together from there. And that gives us something profound in common. So let me define some terms. In answer to Pilate's question, what is truth? Until very recently, everyone at least agreed on what the word means. Truth is that which rightly corresponds to reality. Fair enough. Truth is that which rightly corresponds to reality. If you believe something to be true, but that doesn't correspond to reality, you're mistaken. If you believe something to be true, and it does rightly correspond to reality, congratulations, you have a correct understanding of the truth, right? Until very recently, everyone at least agreed on the meaning of the term. More recently, we have a culture that likes to take words that have had long-standing meanings and redefine them. It's an exercise of power. One of the few, and I mean very few things that I have in common with and appreciate in the voices of certain postmodern philosophers is I agree with their insight that when we try to redefine words that have long-standing meaning, it's an exercise of power of one group over another. They introduced the notion of the correspondence theory of truth. Well, isn't that a quaint definition? The idea that truth is what rightly corresponds to reality. What a quaint notion. In a Pilate-esque sentiment, they would say, what is truth? And even if there is truth, who's to say that you could know it? And by what means could it be known? It's a quaint theory, but truth is really more socially constructed. We get together and we sort of agree on what we believe to be true, and that functions as truth in our midst. But if another group of people get together and they socially construct another idea and something else entirely, even oppositionally contradictory, that's truth for them. And so we have that saying that we hear, well, that might be true for you, but that's not true for me. Which brings me to my next term. Again, we're defining our terms. We've attempted to answer Pilate's question, what is truth? Now we're trying to define another term, relativism. Relativism. Well, this comes up, some people will go back to the brilliant physicist Einstein, who said, well, everything is relative. The irony there, when Einstein said everything is relative, he was making an objective truth claim. I don't know if you've ever thought about that, but when you say everything is relative, he was trying to describe the objective truth about reality, right? Of course, he was speaking of the physical universe, one thing in relative position to another, and he was describing reality, not philosophizing about socially constructed theories of truth and things like that. Okay. But relativism, as opposed to the idea that truth is objective, it's a given. We don't invent it. We don't construct it. Rather, we discover it and come to know it. Okay. Relativism is anchored in this idea that, no, that's a quaint correspondence theory. Rather, truth is something that functions in the midst of a community that socially constructs what is true for them, as opposed to a different community that socially constructs what's true for them. Having defined our two terms here, truth and relativism, in the context of encouraging you to focus on the vocation, to cultivate a renewed confidence in truth, would like to share with you two quotes from one of my favorite authors, a man whose name you might recognize as Clive Staples Lewis, C.S. Lewis. I will be sharing with you from two works that he wrote in the 1940s in the midst of World War II and shortly thereafter. A moral crisis for the world certainly a defining moral crisis for the modern world. From his work, The Abolition of Man. If you have not read this work, I'll be circling back around and charging you, graduates, if this for some reason slipped through the cracks in your curriculum, I'm assigning it to you after today. A quote: "A great many of those who, quote, debunk traditional, or as they would say, sentimental values." All right. Another quote for you, again from The Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis. "A dogmatic belief in objective value is necessary to the very idea of a rule which is not tyranny, or an obedience which is not slavery." All right? A dogmatic belief in objective value. In other words, this is right, this is wrong. This is what is of value, this is what is not. And these values exist in reality. Because if they don't exist in reality, then what is left? It's my belief that I am going to assert over you and upon you. If reality is not the arbiter, all that's left is conflict and power struggle. Reality has to be the arbiter. Right? If reality is not the arbiter, then it's one man subjecting another to tyranny. It's one woman subjecting another to a forced obedience. And it's not agreement in what is right, in what is good, in what is true. The arbitrariness of relativism and the power struggle it necessarily evokes has wrought great havoc and damage in our society. It disarms us from the very ability to have an argument. I teach a course here at the university called Argumentation and Critical Thinking. I would suggest to you the following: an argument is not even possible if reality is not the arbiter. If we are not, through argumentation, trying to come to a mutual understanding of the truth, then argument is a pernicious, insidious, and deceptive name for one person trying to dominate another. Only if there is shared truth, failing a shared understanding of truth, at least a shared conviction of the importance of pursuing truth. Apart from that, what's left? The loss of objective truth as the goal and the point of reference fragments, alienates, and isolates people from one another. Because there is no longer a shared reality, but only a multiplicity of subjectively constructed identities. This term should resonate with many of you. Identities. This is my identity, and you will not infringe upon it. My identity ascends and is transcendent. My individuated identity is above every other consideration. I would suggest to you that in this prevailing culture of relativism, various and sundry identities are an attempt by a lost and hurting person or people to find something meaningful in a world that is otherwise entirely nihilistic. Nihilistic from the Latin nihil, meaning nothing. Nothing. There is no meaning. We can describe through science the cause of everything, but the meaning of nothing. C.S. Lewis, in another work of his, as I promised, a second reference to C.S. Lewis, The Great Divorce. It's an allegory in which he describes various trips to heaven and hints at hell. It's an allegory, a very thoughtful book. Graduates, I won't assign this as a mandate for you. Read The Abolition of Man first. But if you can, as time permits, take a holiday, but as time permits, read The Great Divorce. You'll be glad you did. C.S. Lewis allegorically describes trips to heaven in this way. Heaven is described as real. What is heaven? Reality. Full stop. Reality. When people go to heaven, it's hostile to their sensibilities. Why? Because they are a certain way. They have, in the language of our postmodernists, a certain relativism. They have certain beliefs that turn out not to rightly correspond to reality. And reality is therefore bristly and abrasive to their sensibilities. They would rather not be there, if you please. And so they get on the bus and go on their way. They would rather have what they believe to be true, even when it does not rightly correspond to reality. But if you hold on to these beliefs, what must you do? C.S. Lewis describes in his allegory the experience of hell as ever-deepening isolation, alienation, and loneliness. If I insist upon what I believe that does not rightly correspond to reality, I have to isolate myself. I have to go deeper and deeper into my own walled-off, private, alienated and alienating, isolated existence in order to hold these beliefs. I certainly cannot be in the midst of others whose beliefs will be different from my own because, well, they're constructing what they believe, I'm constructing what I believe. That might be true for you, but that's not true for me. And so we need to be isolated. Relativism isolates and divides. The belief that truth exists and is knowable, and ultimately a shared reality that everyone rightly understands, that's what unifies. A shared reality and an understanding of a shared truth is the only thing that can unify. I would like to bring to you a word from my own bishops, a word from the highest authority in this country, from my own tradition and my own bishops. In the midst of the ascendancy of individuated fragmented and isolating identities, we lose the conviction that we all here share in common, that there is, in truth, one identity that binds us all together, the human one. There is such a thing as human nature, and we all share it in common. Let me read to you a statement that was just published on August 18th in light of recent events you may have heard about. And I quote from my bishops. The essence of the Christian gospel and the spirit of the Orthodox tradition are entirely and self-evidently incompatible with ideologies that declare the superiority of any race over another. It is formally condemned as heresy, the strongest category of false teaching. End quote. Statement from the Assembly of Canonical Orthodox Bishops of the United States of America. In the midst of people seeking an identity, saying, this is who I am in contradistinction to someone else, trying therein to find meaning and assert one identity over and even above another, when it loses sight of the truth that there is one human identity, at that point, it immediately falls into the gravest error a Christian can pronounce upon: heresy. There are many other individuated identities that people assert that are equally offensive. I will not recount them all for you today. You can imagine for yourselves. This is my identity, or that's my identity. All of these things are attempts to find meaning in a prevailing culture that has lost confidence. And we discover meaning, we don't invent it. We face many challenges, but always remember, all traditional faith and morals hold this vocation in common. This was the nature of my address to you today. We live in a prevailing culture of relativism. Find those you share this in common with. That's why, as I suggested at the beginning, it's not unfitting that an Orthodox priest of all people be invited to offer a keynote address at an august graduation ceremony such as this. Because in spite of whatever else we might not share in common, this we share in common for the sake of our society and our civilization. We believe there is a truth. We believe the truth is knowable. This alone makes us remarkable in our society. But you and I share something else. We believe in this man, Jesus of Nazareth, when he said, I am the truth. I am the truth. And so we look to Jesus to find what cannot be found anywhere else. I will leave you with one final quote from C.S. Lewis. Again, from The Abolition of Man. Quote, "The task of the modern educator is not to cut down jungles, but to irrigate deserts." The task of the modern educator is not to cut down jungles, but to irrigate deserts. Perhaps in a different context, we could have something that could analogously be called a jungle. There are many different truth claims, and the place has been overrun by many competing truth claims, devoid of the confidence that truth itself exists or is in any case knowable. Graduates, when you go out, you're going out into a desert. Irrigate it. Cultivate the confidence that there is a truth and it can be known. Because once you've done that, the words of Jesus ring true. I am the truth.